Hi, how are you?
Who said that? Oh, that's right. It's the year 1983, and you're walking down the street in downtown Austin, where you see a quiet young man on the sidewalk. As you pass him by, he says to you exactly that. Hi, how are you? My name is Daniel Johnston, and I will be famous one day. And then he gives you this, a tape. In fact, his album for free. And it kind of sounds like this.
There ain't no color in the sky.
Hi, How Are You is a 30-minute tape of 15 strange and minimal songs that sound like they have been recorded straight from inside a trash can. And although that might be repulsive for some people, it's really all part of Daniel Johnston's style. His abstract soundscapes, paired with his unique songwriting, is mainly the reason why the many self-made tapes he gave out to friends and just random people on the street made him an underground legend, and eventually a mainstream sensation, so popular that the city of Austin made January 22nd Hi, How Are You Day in honor of Daniel Johnston and his art. All of that because Kurt Cobain basically wore a shirt. And Daniel's music was so different compared to any music heard before that it also created a whole new genre, lo-fi. And no, I don't mean the anime girl lo-fi hip-hop beats, but lo-fi as in music with a very low quality of sound. But none of the tapes he released compared to Hi, How Are You? Because this tape is unfinished. Due to a mental breakdown, Johnston was unable to finish the album to his liking. And you can clearly see in these songs what led to that breakdown. These songs touching often the themes of depression, mental illness, and even suicide. Bet you didn't think about that looking at that froggy guy. But even though it's considered incomplete by Daniel, this tape is mainly recognized as his best project, his unfinished masterpiece. And in this video, we'll analyze this very strange record, track by track. And hopefully this video won't last almost an hour long, because last time that happened, my MacBook did not enjoy that very much. But before we get to the actual track list, I feel like it's crucial to go over how this album was made and also by who. Because to get a full grasp of this album, you kind of need to know the context. This album was recorded by Daniel in September 1983, all of which was recorded on a cheap tape recorder, which is why this album sounds so special. At that time, he was 22 years old and staying at his sister's house in San Marcos, making a living off of delivering pizzas. So kind of pretty depressing setting to start with. It's also important to note that Daniel is bipolar and dealing with depression. But instead of me explaining how Daniel is psychologically, I feel like the first track of this album could do that 100 times better than me. So without further ado, let's go for a ride into Hi, How Are You?
Hi, how are you? Every morning he got up, dreading each moment he had to be awake. He'd look at the floor and scribble on gum wrappers.
The album starts off with a poem-like song, containing only Daniel's voice and the grainy noise of air picked up by his tape recorder. The lyrics reflect Daniel's experience with depression and how he thinks other people pity him for that. The first phrase said in the song is, "Hi, how are you?" Which could just be a way to welcome the listener. I mean, that's exactly what he said when he handed out those cassettes on the street. And also, if you haven't noticed, it's the name of the album. So, wake up. However, this introduction could also be viewed as kind of an outsider point of view. In fact, somebody else is asking Daniel how he feels, and he replies by telling you that he feels bad. And then in the chorus, this person replies,
Poor you, poor you, No one understands you, poor you, poor you.
And although this reply shows some sort of empathy, it's clearly ironic. While Daniel is struggling with depression and dark thoughts, he only wants help from someone, but he feels like everyone acts in such a repulsive way when he tries to get that help. Instead of replying, "I'm here for you, let me help you," everyone just shows him they don't really care. "You have depression? Poor you. Not my problem, though." And that creates doubt on the authenticity of the initial question. Actually, does anyone care how you are?
Big business monkey, nothing's funny. Big business monkey, everything's money.
In the second track, Big Business Monkey, we are finally introduced to the musical world of Daniel Johnston. In this song, you can hear him playing a stiff melody on a keyboard, accompanied with some sort of tapping. Hearing it, it kind of feels like he tapped his hand against like some sort of wooden desk or just like the floor. Kind of like this. But that tapping sounds actually comes from the keyboard as he hardly hits the keys. Here Daniel gives us lyrics and a vocal delivery in a very childish way, because this song is mainly about mocking capitalism. Wow, I said it what? Capitalism. Sorry, I'm having very... Especially big boy companies. In fact, he points out how selfish those companies are because they only care about one thing. Can you guess what that is? It's not you, it's money, I'm sorry. And the point that I'm getting at is that even if Jeff Bezos has a billion bajillion buckaroonies, he's still gonna die. And that's the point Daniel makes on the song.
And everything you cling to will rot, and everything you do will be forgot.
And also, keep in mind that at that time, Daniel is delivering pizzas. So this could be a way of like channeling out his anger towards the companies that employ him, basically. He's working minimum wage while the big boss goes into space. And also, this ties in with his depression, because although this song is mainly about others, it also reflects how he thinks. Nothing matters. Money doesn't matter. Nothing matters. We're all gonna die. And this theme continues in the next song, Walking the Cow. Walking the Cow is usually considered among the best songs of Daniel Johnston, and easily the most popular song from this album. Instrumentally, it kind of shares the same ideas as the last track, but the melodies are more thought out and developed. The song also starts with a weird sample. For now, I won't pay too much attention to it, but it will come back, trust me. According to Daniel, Walking the Cow was inspired by an ice cream sticker. Wait for it. And it means carrying a burden or a responsibility. And this is kind of all in relation to Daniel's life at the moment. He has no idea what he's doing with his life or where he's going. He's just walking the cow. I'd like to raise a point on the whole aesthetic of the album, because from a technical point of view, and only technical, these songs sound very bad. Everything sounds muffled in whatever way you listen to the album, especially with earbuds. I listened to this album at least 6 times to get a whole grasp of it with these, and every single time I got a headache. I know, poor me. Poor you. But from a creative point of view, these songs are amazing. This is the most simple music I've ever listened to, because it's just a guy making music in his room. He doesn't care how it sounds like or what people think of it. These songs are all centered around his ideas and his creative world. To me, it's the purest form of music. And for that, Walking the Cow has got to be among the best songs I've ever listened to.
I see your face. I picture myself with a guitar.
I Picture Myself with the Guitar is one of the shorter tracks of the album, being only 44 seconds long. It consists of quick guitar strums sounding out of tune, paired with Daniel's shy voice, basically repeating over and over, I see your face, I picture myself with a guitar. And this is clearly one of the more minimal songs on the tape, and due to its shortness, its meaning is kind of open to interpretation. To me, I'd say this song is meaningless, but it's a deep dive, so I'm legally not allowed to say that. So if it wasn't meaningless, I'd guess it refers to Daniel's thoughts on how his music sounds. Daniel could be picturing himself making music with a better quality and making a contrast to how his music sounds like right now, with these awkward guitar strums. In fact, how he imagines his music in his head versus how it actually sounds like on tape. Of course, this is my interpretation, so if you have a different one, please feel free to share it in the comments. I always love all of your comments. On track 5, Despair Came Knocking, themes of depression and despair are further explored by giving them some sort of physical form.
Despair came knocking at my door. I let her in.
By saying despair came knocking at my door and I let her in, Daniel states that to him, the sadness he feels is a choice he makes. Despair knocks at his door and he consciously lets her in. He could just not answer the door, but instead he lets his room be filled with despair's presence. And this song is very important to understand how Daniel precisely feels during one of his depressive episodes. He mentions despair began smoking, which indicates how these thoughts envelop him in this sort of smoke. And then he feels tired and like the room he's in is dirty. But the instrumental is, I think, the most crushing part of the song, because it's just so sad. This strange guitar with the ambient noise and the unstable tempo gives me a feeling like if I just wanted to give up and lie on the floor forever. And then the melody slightly slowing down towards the end of the song is just soul-crushing.
For a while. I am a baby in my universe. I'll live forever.
I Am a Baby in My Universe starts with the sound of a distant ticking clock, and then suddenly shifts to a stressful and almost uncomfortable instrumental, kind of similar to the one in I Picture Myself with a Guitar, with Daniel repeating in a mocking way, I am a baby in my universe, I'll live forever, I'm only 22. Here, Daniel points out how most of the youth is acting in such a careless way, like if they were living without consequences. And it almost feels like Daniel is precisely talking about people he knows, like some sort of silent attack, finding them stupid, kind of mocking them again. But this song could also be Daniel's way of mocking the selfishness we all have, how most people live their life in a childish way, thinking about themselves before anyone else. I'm gonna live forever. Everything's about me, and me. But you can say you can live forever, but we will all have a time to go, eventually. Our life's a ticking clock. This song was made in 1983, but I think it resonates even more today with the impact of the internet and especially social media. Social media is the most selfish invention ever made. Social media just shows how every human is so selfish. Just go on your Twitter feed and find a tweet that doesn't contain the word I, or that is entirely unrelated to the person posting it. It's impossible. We all tweet because we have a reason to do it that is ultimately beneficial for us. I usually only tweet when I release a new video. And the fact I just said that was not only to provide an example for what I've been talking about for the past 40 seconds, but also was to inform you that I have a Twitter and to discreetly incept the idea in your mind to go follow me on there. See how selfish I am? I went pretty far there for that song, but I mean, food for thought. It's a deep dive after all. I think I'm allowed to go deep. Nervous Love is the shortest song on Hi, How Are You? And you just heard it all. It's only 19 seconds. It consists of a very faint guitar melody with nervous vocals from Daniel. And I mean, it's pretty fitting with the title. This is probably the most nervous song I've ever heard. It's short and you can't hear anything. Like, that's basically me talking to my high school crush in 7th grade. But the song ends with the question, Hi, how are you? Repeated multiple times in a very overblown way compared to the song and the rest of the record, actually. It feels aggressive, and that aggressive feeling contrasts with the nervousness of the song, because Daniel is clearly an introvert. Maybe he loves someone, but he doesn't like to talk about it, and he certainly doesn't want to share it. And that overblown, hi, how are you, could be a way to illustrate people wanting to know more, just people asking questions, gossiping. So here it's pretty interesting because Daniel gives a whole new sense to the phrase, hi, how are you? In the first track, Poor You, hi, how are you? Is seen as a careless question, while on Nervous Love, the question is one Daniel doesn't want to be asked.
I'll never marry, I'll never wed. Nobody wants to kiss you when you're dead. Nobody wants to lie in bed with you when your flesh is rotting.
Another really short track is I'll Never Marry, coming in at about 20 seconds of runtime. And this song shows how Daniel thinks he's gonna die young. He will never marry, he will never wed, and that's because he thinks his flesh will be rotting before that. It's a very absurd look to the theme of death. His tone throughout the song is almost comical, but more importantly, this is the song containing the first suicidal thoughts of the album. But those thoughts get quickly turned around in the next song.
Get yourself together or fall apart. Make your mind up or let yourself down.
Get Yourself Together could be kind of a response to the last two tracks, Nervous Love and I'll Never Marry, because on here Daniel is basically saying to himself, dude, get your shit together. I've read that in this track, Daniel apparently pretends to be someone else, which could be true. It could certainly be coming from an outsider's point of view. But personally, I think it also reflects his bipolar disorder. If you don't have a clear idea of what a bipolar disorder is, I think the quickest way I could explain it is you have highs and lows. You could be extremely positive and productive for a time and then just tank. Your mood is down, you don't want to do anything. It's like that Homeland girl from the show. The one that cries weird. This song could be a way to illustrate his high phase, reflecting on his low phase, on I'll Never Marry, for example. But regardless, this song is a bop. I love that song.
Running water, where are you running from?
Running Water is another song with no instrumental. Well, if you call water an instrument, then that's what's playing in the background. And this song has some of the cutest lyrics I've heard in a while. I don't know why I find them so cute. It really seems like child thoughts. It's such an innocent observation. But here Daniel doesn't talk about running water in a literal sense, because running water actually represents everyone else. He observes how everyone else moves on in life by running away from their problems, not facing them. And this could be a way for Daniel to not feel bad about the fact that he can't really move on, because since the beginning of the record, Daniel runs around in circles, trapped in this cycle of despair and confusion. But at least he faces his problems. Most people don't. People just wander around, letting running water take you wherever.
You always seem to be on the run.
Desperate Man Blues is definitely one of the most interesting tracks on the whole tape. In fact, Daniel delivers his most in-depth look at his depression while a heavy, modified jazz sample is playing in the background.
There ain't no color in the sky anymore.
I don't know if there's any effects on this, or it's just like the tape recorder, but that sample is from a song called Desperate Dan by Johnny Dankworth. And it sounds like this sample is kind of pitched down because it gives such a weird feeling hearing it. And remember, this record was made in 1983. For that time, the whole sampling shit, this is so weird. Sample culture was really not as prevalent as today. And that was already a bold thing to sample other songs. But also to add effects like this, if there are some, this just shows how much the guy was ahead of his time. But lyric-wise, in this song, Daniel is a very desperate man.
Maybe something will come along and make me happy, and I just can't see no color in the sky anymore. There's color there, I'm sure, but it ain't mine.
And although most of the song almost sounds like some sort of suicide letter, at times you can see that Daniel still has some hope that he can be happy. Overall, such a weird mix of blues and just, this song is amazing. I love this song.
I'm a desperate man. Hey Jude, come on Joe, don't make that sad song any sadder than it already is.
Hey Joe feels almost weird when you listen to it after all those past tracks, because it's got a pretty traditional structure. It's just a grand piano paired with Daniel's joyful singing, which is kind of a breath of fresh air after such dark tracks. This song shows Daniel talking to 4 characters: Joe, Jack, Sid, and George, and basically cheering them up, whatever their troubles are.
There's a heaven is, there's a star for you.
It's kind of a response to Desperate Man Blues in some way, trying to ditch that desperate mindset and getting yourself together. Funnily enough, Hey Jude is obviously a reference to Hey Jude by the Beatles. And not only because of the title, but also the context. Take a sad song and make it better. I'm gonna let you connect that one, it's not that hard.
She called pest control, and when she was sprayed, she never was bothered again.
She Called Pest Control is a very similar track to I'll Never Marry, similar in structure, but while I'll Never Marry was all those bad thoughts and becoming a new person. In some sort, this is Daniel's goal, and also Joe's goal. Remember Joe? Well, he comes back in not the next song, but the next 2 songs. Keep Punching Joe is the second track. But anyway, Joe is motivated. Life in general. While Daniel has put himself in a mindset where he can overcome anything and get rid of anything, he became kind of blinded by it and didn't realize how hard life punches back. But he's not ready to give up yet. Folks, I think we got ourselves a boxing match.
Round 2.
Tell you what, cigarette butt, when I get back, we're going to have a boxing match.
No More Pushing Joe Around is the direct response to the last track. And on here, Daniel says he won't tolerate being pushed around anymore. This can be interpreted as kind of a burst of anger. He's fucking sick of everyone and everything, kind of a liberation of some sort.
No more pushing Joe around. No more pushing Joe around. There'll be no more pushing Joe around. He's up and punching now.
Compared to its sister track, Keep Punching Joe, this song is the complete opposite instrumentally. While Keep Punching Joe had a real orchestra, on this song, Daniel is the orchestra. And this just shows how Daniel imagines what his music could sound like if he had the power to make it in a different way. If he had a legitimate orchestra. Every instrument is literally just his voice, but still, you can imagine big horns and vivid drums playing all over this song. It's presented in such a wholesome way.
I'll tell you what, sister-in-law, I'm sorry I had to use your car, but you...
The song ends on this epic finale where Daniel sighs like he's done evacuating all those random thoughts attacking people he knows, and honestly feels like he's won the fight against life itself.
There'll be no more pushing Joe around.
We hear Daniel pressing the record button on his tape recorder, and this should be the end of the album. He's won. But this short silence is broken when we hear Daniel pressing the record button again. And this time, Daniel comes back and says,
I take it all back. I take it all back. I take it all back. I take it all back.
This is the representation of the mental breakdown that Daniel experienced during the making of this album. And there's a lot to unpack. First of all, Daniel says that he takes it all back. But what does he take back? Well, basically this whole record. In fact, the guy has fallen so low that he states everything that has been said in the last 30 minutes of the tape is pointless. Basically, it shouldn't have been said. But that is not the only thing added to the end of the track, because following the 4 occurrences of the phrase I take it all back, a very muffled recording of someone talking can be heard. And I say very muffled because listening to it just like that, it's almost impossible to get a grasp of what is being said.
You are now starting on the greatest adventure of your life.
So it might not be 100% accurate, but what is said is basically this.
Getting acquainted with yourself. You are now starting on the greatest adventure of your life. If you will listen with a mind free from previously formed opinions, skepticism, and prejudice. Stop and think while you listen.
This is a monologue from an unknown man, which is directed to Daniel's situation. He needs to get acquainted with himself because he is so young and has so much left to live for. But my favorite lines of the whole record is probably the last 2 ones, because it's so interesting. It could literally mean so much things. If you are listening with a mind free of previously formed opinions, skepticism, and prejudice, stop and think. Why have you listened? For you viewers at home, think about it for a minute or two. To my interpretation, let's say you're in a conversation with someone about like gay marriage. And now this is just an example of a controversial subject. Let's not turn the comment section into a Twitter debate thing. This is just an example. It could be politics, anything else. So let's say that I'm for gay marriage and I'm listening to someone who isn't and is trying to get their point across. I wouldn't listen, because no matter what he says, I'm listening with a mind full of preformed opinions and prejudice. You would be hearing him, not listening to him. But if you are listening to that same person who is against gay marriage, only this time you have never heard of gay marriage before. You have no idea what it is. That means you don't have any preformed opinions, nor skepticism, nor prejudice towards the subject. So stop and think. Why have you listened? To form an opinion, so that next time you're in a conversation about that subject, you don't have to listen. And that ties in perfectly with the first track, Poor You, where Daniel is miserable and feels like nobody is listening to him. And also enhancing the line, I take it all back. It doesn't matter. You're not listening. That's basically my take on this. And I'm interested to see if you have any different ones. Well, whoever is still watching at this point. And finally, the song ends with the sort of mashup of every past song from the tape. But this time, Daniel is nowhere to be seen, which could be again a way of taking it all back, getting rid of all his vocals, all his observation, thoughts on every track. But the most important sound of this mashup is the sound I asked you to keep in mind earlier in this video. It clearly has some signification because it comes back so much and it ends the album. So, what does it mean? Firstly, it would be crucial to organize what we know about this sound, because since this element of the album is so vague and imprecise, to start theorizing on what it could be, we need to gather all the facts. So the sound itself, right off the bat, doesn't really have a joyful tone, but doesn't really have a bad one either. And now, of course, the emotions felt when listening to a certain musical piece is completely relative to the person that is listening to it. So you might feel something different in me, for example. But awkwardly enough, I can't say precisely or even vaguely how this sound makes me feel, while on most songs I can. But I'm getting too lost there, so let's get back on track. So this sound is heard in 3 separate tracks: Walking the Cow, Desperate Man Blues, and No More Pushing Joe Around. And these tracks are linked by the fact they all represent an important turning point of the album. For example, Walking the Cow shows Daniel confused on what his purpose in living is, causing him to go into a depressive phase with some thoughts of death and suicide on tracks like Despair Came Knocking and I'll Never Marry. Then in Desperate Man Blues, that phase is brought to a term because Daniel starts having hope he can get rid of his depression. That starts a hopeful phase, since all of the tracks after that are very happy tracks compared to the rest of the tape. And in No More Pushing Joe Around, all hope is lost and Daniel is back to square one, miserable and depressed. So basically,